we can start off with talking about, I think Stephanie and Heather, we wanted to make sure you both were on because you have obviously, and Brian Cuthbert, I realize you're supposed to be up here as well. So let me do that because so we asked a few people who do a lot of events to get up and talk about their experience. I mean, obviously, Brian with Diversified is predominantly an event business. Heather with Access Intelligence is I think, Heather, you've mentioned to me 70% of your business was events. I don't know where that stands today. That'll be part of the update. And Stephanie, I know events are a significant part of what you do. But I don't have a clue if that. I always got the sense it wasn't the majority of your business, but a substantial portion of it. And you can comment on that if you choose to. But so Brian, I have set it up so you can be getting on camera as you're ready.
Yeah.
But and there we go. Hi. So, welcome everybody. So I wanted to get a sense for, and David, obviously, I know you do.
Small amount.
Yeah. So we represent the range, and I wanted to start with Heather and Brian because they're sort of at the 800-pound gorilla end of the spectrum. No offense intended. And so, Heather, why don't you tell us, take a few minutes and tell us what's going on at Access in thinking about managing your event business these days.
Yes, thanks, Ed, and thanks for reading the attendees. So given the audience, I'll spare everybody kind of our overview on the kind of business that we have. Sorry, let me know if the audio is okay. I was messing with the mic when I couldn't hear you at the beginning, so I might be blasting. I think the thing that we've really tried to struggle with is how and when can we take events live. So we do run the gamut. We have everything from big trade shows to small conferences. And I will say for this audience and the folks on the phone, our small conferences have obviously been a lot easier to pivot to virtual than our big events. The big events where you've got a couple $1 million in exhibitor and sponsor, that is still a big pain point, trying to figure out how to take somebody who's invested $50,000 and convince them that they can get the same experience virtually has been a big challenge. And so people, if you're sitting on the other side, you're like, God, I'd love an event with it's a $3 or $4 or $5 or $8 million event, and then when you watch all of that kind of evaporating through your fingers, it's been difficult. Our original strategy out of the gate, which seems so naive now, was to get everything moved into the fall. We thought that would bode well for us. We worked with all of our hotels and that things shifted. For a while, New York.
Heather, I'm not sure. Your audio is coming in well, but we've got echo. So I've turned on everybody's microphone so we can have a discussion. But while other people are talking, I would just suggest if you can mute your individual microphones. It seems like we're getting a little feedback here. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. That's fine. So, it seemed like it was a good strategy. The East Coast numbers were coming down. And then, at the end, what ended up happening, obviously, is all hell broke loose in the South. And so now we've had to pivot and really are looking at postponing almost all of our live events. We do still have some small conferences that we're planning in the December timeframe that are very regional, drivable. So a couple in DC that are all government focused that we have not canceled yet. We're still hoping that we can get those off. And ironically, we have one in Indianapolis the first week of August. Again, a regional event that's drivable, and Indianapolis thus far has been relatively unscathed. So we're thinking that that's an event that we can move forward with. We have tried a myriad of platforms. I'm happy to kind of get into that discussion, and a myriad of pricing points and pricing strategies. I will say we finished, and also a whole host of different, do you do it all in one day? Do you do it over several Thursdays? Do you do it a couple afternoons over the course of a week? So everything is, I think I posted on our Slack channel this morning, I said to Barb, every day is a learning experience. You know, early on when we were quickly getting things out, we were seeing a half-life of a week, which is, you know, gut wrenching because you're like, how are you ever going to plan and move forward with a half-life of a week? But for the most recent event that we just concluded last week, we had a half-life of 3 weeks. So we marketed it for about 7. The half-life was 3 weeks. And we did about 50-50 between exhibit sponsor, really more sponsor than exhibit, and attendee. And we had a price point around $400. We have been in an ongoing mode of pushing our price points up. And so this is the first one that we hosted that, you know, wasn't quite at the $500 threshold, but moving those price points up. So I'm happy to get into the gory details, but I think, again, we're learning like everyone else, and are now trying to, you know, what I will also say for those having events that do rebook, and Brian can also speak to this, you know, when you finish off an event, you do a rebook when you're doing exhibitors and sponsors. And one of the things that we really focused on is keeping and securing the dollars that people rebooked last year into this year, right? So if you're sitting on $1 million in exhibitor revenue, my whole focus has been, how do I fulfill that $1 million? I'm far less worried about beating the bushes to find the new guys. We're really focused in on how can we, whether it's through media, whether it's through a virtual event, which, by the way, we're starting to call digital and online. Virtual seems to feel a little passe. How can we find a way to create a package that meets their needs? And it may be over the course of the fall and not just a single event, but we're very focused on how we can fulfill that revenue. And while we're having really good success with that, you know, we are very rapidly, at least I am, since I'm not on the front lines executing, really trying to figure out, okay, so what happens in 2021, right? We had all this money that had been pre-booked, and now we got to figure out and get concerned about, with an economic downturn, with there likely to be no events. I don't know if anybody saw on the news this morning, Philadelphia has said no events until March 2021. So what does that look like for us? And what's the likelihood that we'll be able to have some substantial spend from the exhibitor and sponsor dollars going into 2021? So that's kind of my broad brush of where we are, and happy to dig in on more detail, but want to give my colleagues a chance to review kind of what they're doing.
Well, great. Thank you, Heather. That's a great overview, and we will certainly get into discussion. Yeah, it's great to have that overview, and I want to add a couple of things. One is people's mics are on, so when you you know, when you unmute, you can ask questions. There's also the chat feature and the questions feature in the panel on the side, so you can submit questions that way. And I may be you know, I'll be checking those and communicating while we're going on. Brian, I'd love to have you go next, if you would.
Sure. So I appreciate you guys having me on with this, and it has been a challenging year, I know, for everybody. For us at Diversified runs events all over the world. Some of the largest events, particularly our seafood events, which we're not running and not able to run this year. My world is more conference, digital products, and then I have a few trade shows in my portfolio that would be more sort of mid-size, small to mid-size, about 60 to 80,000 square feet in exhibit revenue, in exhibitor space rather. So for us, all the points Heather sort of touched on are very similar in terms of how we're looking at it. Protecting the money that was in-house has been the priority. In the markets where we have been able to move money into membership and other training products, future events, other products that we're creating, we've been really successful. So anything with the training element to it, where it's been more education-based, things more of your conference model, we've had a lot of success, in particular, keeping that attendee money in-house, moving it to other products, continuing to deliver value. We're moving events in that realm online and have had success. One of our biggest conference globally tends to bring between 2,000 and 2,500 admins at a very high price point together. And we moved that event online. We used Visibo as the platform for it. And we're charging $9.95 to attend, and we've seen good pickup. People are transferring and new people are registering. We feel we can deliver the ROI for the attendees there. To Heather's point, we are struggling with how in any of these platforms you can deliver meaningful ROI to your users. So we have in many of the markets a robust webinar demand generation business. So we have seen that grow 30+% in a lot of our markets. And we're continuing to deliver leads. There is a need still in most of the markets we serve for engagement, for content, for the things to keep the community going. So every market we have are running free events, free meetings like this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to get people together, to continue the best practice sharing. And that's been really important from an engagement perspective. From a revenue perspective, we're able to hold price points on all of our digital offerings. That's been fine. For our events the rest of the year, if you asked me 6 weeks ago, I felt great about my November accounts payable event. We have a large event, a trade show that runs Austin in December. We're in California in January, New York in early February. That's all my group. Right now, we're evaluating what to do with our late fall and looking at options with Q1 as well, because any impression that a switch is magically going to flip and you're going to be able to run these shows of any size. I think your training events, to Heather's point, your smaller events, just depending on the state, you'll be able to get in. But we really have to start to think about what's 21 going to look like. How much smaller do we think some of these shows are going to be? And ensuring that we are factoring in the digital component to all of these events where it makes sense. To me, it continues to make the most sense. If you're creating an event, it's around the conference model. David, I see a hand.
Yeah.
Did you say, I'm thinking about it because I think Barbara's on the call too, and she's got to run the DC meeting next week that's on lead on marketing change. Did you say or imply, either you or Heather, that you're adding different like virtual events to increase lead gen? Like, because we're trying to fiddle around with that to sort of replace what we might be losing with the big marketing program. So
we are doing that in our world.
Could you maybe just give me a minute on what you're doing there or whatever? I'd be really interested.
Yeah, the models have ranged. So we're running a virtual hosted buyer event in 2 weeks using a platform called Grip. It's got a good AI to it. We're going to connect buyer seller. It's running at a nice margin. Revenue's not necessarily, you always want more, but it's good. It's a good test. We're doing demo days for our vendors. 6 vendors are going to provide a demo of the solution over the course of an hour. And we're running multiple of those, and we've been selling them out in our accounting technology space. We are running small leadership roundtables. So working with a vendor partner who has a high price point type solution, and they're looking to sell to a particular segment, size company, industry, whatever it may be, at a certain level. We bring those people together in a forum like this, like we've done in person, and we're able to sell those. Those are things that we've added, because remember, we keep pushing these things out. That's taking inventory on how we're getting out and communicating to the market. But those have been a few ways that we have found success on top of webinars and white papers, which have been sort of a core lead gen thought leadership play for us. And Heather, I don't know if you guys have anything that you've added.
We're doing pretty much the same. The other thing we are doing is we are doing some more media generated lead gen. We're adding to it. So we do a campaign, a drip marketing campaign that we're yeah, it's a little bit more complicated in terms of sales, but it can drive big dollars. So, you know, I'd be happy to give you more detail on that if you're interested.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. And thank you, Brian. Stephanie. And by the way, I want to mention also we've been joined by Jennifer Brown. Welcome, Jennifer. And Michael Klaus, who Stephanie Williford had reached out to is a service provider in the online event space. So welcome, Michael, as well, and feel free to chime in. Stephanie, go ahead.
Sure. So our experience is similar to Brian and Heather, even though on a much smaller scale. So we don't do any large, what you guys call trade shows with, you know, thousands of people and millions of dollars. But we have several conferences that are, you know, in the 300-person range. And we have one that we were supposed to run in Austin last month. It's now going to be virtual actually next week. So we're in the final throes of getting ready for that. It's interesting that we have right now 450 people registered for it. So more than what we would have had in person, but and what's really cool is that we have a lot of people that we've been able to get registered who wouldn't normally be able to come to a live conference. There's sort of, our conference is called Strategy and Tech. And so we've been looking for the analysts and the strategy people and the business intelligence people and sort of out of the woodwork people, you know, who, and what we've been successful with is getting teams of people to register, 5-10 people from a company, you know, and 5-10 people from a company wouldn't ever have come to our live conference. They just don't have that kind of a budget or that kind of time to spend out of the office for those types of roles. So that's interesting. And I would love to think that we could go forward and have a new opportunity to bring those people out of the woodwork. So when it relates to the vendors, all the same stuff that Brian and Heather, you know, talked about, we've been able to convert. We've had success in selling folks on sponsorships, of course, at a lower price point than they would have been for the live event, but they're sort of taking a leap. They don't necessarily believe that it's going to be that as effective, but also the risk is a lot lower. But while on the one hand, it's unclear that the experience can be the same, on the other hand, they're going to get in front of people with roles that they wouldn't have been in front of before. So that's kind of neat. And what it has made us think is that even if in the future we have a live event again, what we see value in is doing a hybrid that's not just live streaming the live event for people at home, but really having two simultaneous events that have some intersection. Maybe you live stream a keynote or something like that, but you can't expect people to just sort of witness what's going on with a live event. You have to have your own experience that is catered to people on the computer. And what scares me about that is the labor required, because it's always like all that we can handle just to, to staff a live event or to staff a virtual event, and doing both at the same time is interesting. But anyway, those are some of the thoughts, just because the audience, I think, would be different. Of course, my fear is that we would have a whole bunch of people selling stuff show up at the live event, and everybody who would buy stuff is on the computer, and there's a total mismatch there. But anyway, that's for another day. Where we have had really good results is with our membership groups, and Brian and Heather sort of alluded to some of this, what has saved us for this year is that we have some high-end membership groups where companies are paying like $10,000 a year for membership. And I invoiced all of that back in December. And so I had collected a lot of it, early in Q1. And I've been still chasing down the little dribs and drabs that hadn't yet come in by March. But for the most part, I haven't lost any of that revenue, very, very little. And so that's been great. And what I'm encouraged by also is that we've offered such incredible value to those companies by having, the meetings like this that we've talked about, the ongoing, the weekly collaboration calls, and, talking about work from home, return to the office, all of those things with lawyers and all kinds of stuff. That has been very valuable. Our advocacy work continues. That's part of what we do with the membership groups. I have an innovation council, and that is needed more, just as much as ever, in terms of really helping these companies to think outside the box and collaborate on how to move forward, and their long-term plans have just accelerated. And anyway, there's just still that need for the innovation and collaboration. So it seems that people are still very committed to those groups, and I've even had some dribs and drabs of new interest in those groups. I haven't done any sales on new stuff, just like the others. We're preserving what we've got and making sure we service the clients we have, and make sure that they're really happy, and doing new stuff as we can, but the priority has been on the existing. So I'm pleased with that. I won't know for sure until later in the fall, when I go to ask for the renewal, what will have happened with people's budgets, and even if they want to renew, will they renew? Will they use the the sort of budget as the excuse? We'll find out. But I can say very, very clearly that we are delivering a lot of value, for sure, in that front. Yes, a lot more webinars people are wanting to do, and so we've been able to do that. We have done nicely, okay, with our subscription products that are, subscription information. So that's, people still need that. There was a sort of a wholesale stop on that for a couple of months, but then that started to open up again as some things become, less unknown for our audience. So that's been good. The big unknown remains, of course, the conferences. We have so we're doing one next week, and that is actually a new conference. It's kind of a rebrand of a 5-year-old conference. And so that's unfortunately another variable that we added in. So I don't know what the future of that one will be, whether it's terrific, whether it's not, I don't know. The other conference that we have is in December, and that was supposed to be in Savannah. And I have just spoken to my, hotel contract guy, and I said, we need clarity. We've got to pull the plug on this event and move forward with our lives to plan the virtual event. And we've already been talking with our steering committee for that event about doing it virtually. And the exciting thing is that the steering committee, which is sizable, is on board, and everybody's saying we're in regardless. And we'll have to see. But I'm planning to cancel that as a live event because I just don't see bringing 400 people together in Savannah in December. I don't see how that's going to work. The price, I'll just say one more thing. Price points are similar to what Heather said. We've been, for an individual registrant, anywhere from like $3.99 to $5.99. We're selling these team tickets at anywhere from like $6.99 to $12.49, I think. We've been able to sell some of those, and it's like, send 4 to 10 people for an average of like $200 a piece, and that's been successful, and it gets those new people involved, and it also is important to get a lot of names on the list because we've got those sponsors who want to see a sizable list, and so that that has served those purposes, even though our per attendee isn't that great. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephanie. I want to mention also, I am getting questions that are queuing up. So once we go through this introductory round, I've got a number of questions to start throwing at you. And David, I saw a note somewhere where you recently came to the realization that you had been working for the hotels all these years. So I'm hoping that in your talk you will comment on that piece as well.
Yeah, the one benefit of this whole mess, as I was joking with somebody in response to one of the Slack channel things, was that we've been sending far too many checks to Steve Wynn in Las Vegas over the last few years. Not a guy I particularly like. I didn't really want to send him any money, so it's kind of nice to not be sending him any money anymore. But that's kind of trying to make a silver lining out of a very, very gray cloud. But I mean, my experience here is much smaller than everyone else on this panel, so I'll just add a couple case study points. We had one event, and our lead sponsor was Bank of New York Mellon. Not the dollars you're dealing with. I didn't have to protect millions, but the event was 8% of our revenue last year. So having it disappear is not a helpful thing. Bank of New York Mellon was only a $10,000 lead sponsorship, to put it in perspective. However, in that case, we did two things to protect the $10,000 that just haven't been mentioned as possibilities. One, on the virtual event, BNY Mellon last year had 6 people at our event. They've got like 60 signed up for a virtual event. So we traded for, you may not be able to network, but you'll be on the platform with everybody else. So that a lot of their financial planners and wealth managers are joining on. So slight possibility of trading off sponsor with, like, sort of you'll be in the virtual crowd with everyone else. So that's one addition to what everybody else has said. And the other thing is, I think all Stephanie and Heather and Brian have all mentioned that they've kind of added programming of sorts, but both BNY Mellon and our 2 second tier sponsors, which were like $7,500 sponsors, small, but both of those we've moved into additional, okay, we've now got this web series related, and so we've managed to maintain both of those by keeping them on the expanded virtual program, which is over a greater number of days, and then continuing it into new webinar programming we've added. So very small mechanical examples of what you're dealing with. And I would say to the Steve Wynn comment in the hotels, again, you can't do this if it's 75% of your revenue, but if it's 8% of your revenue like ours, I've been able to give up the top line. Obviously, we're not going to get the top line, but the bottom line and the cash the cash flow is going to be a little worse too, because we'd be getting huge $1,600 registration checks like crazy right now. We're not getting those, but we're going to end up probably at the end of this positive about 80,000. And last year, after all the checks to Las Vegas, we ended up with 60,000. So the bottom line on this one event is going to be better, a lot less work, but if it was a huge part of our business, we'd have to change the whole structure of our business to support this. We'd have so much extra overhead, we'd be swimming. So my heart goes out to the other parts of Diversified and to you too, Heather, and a lot of the people on the phone. The last comment I wanted to make is, on the SIIA side, I've been attending a lot of the FISD, the financial section webinars. They are, that's the successful part of SIIA apparently, and they've been struggling with the same thing. And I noticed one thing that FISD has done is they moved entirely to sponsored webinars on the topics that are important to their sponsors. They're doing one next week with essentially on data around socially responsible investing, which both S&P Global and Refinitiv, the two, those are Fortune 100 companies that are, I think, sponsoring FISD events to the tune of $50,000 to $100,000 an event. They're like big money sponsors. Next week, there's a webinar on ESG, the data code name for socially responsible investing. Now, here's the perspective, and guess who's the lead speakers? There's somebody from S&P and there's someone from Refinitiv on that panel. So I think FISD is doing a pretty good job of the same migration we're all working on. So as a case study, it might be just worth looking over the fence for those of us who are still SIIA members by this much, and looking at what they're doing. I think they may have some good models for us to look at. So I'm offering that solely to add around the edges to what Stephanie, Heather, and Brian, what you guys have said. And
Yeah, great.
Oh,
Well, thank you, David. So let me start turning to some questions that are already up here, and then I'm sure we're not going to have any trouble filling the time here. First question from Anna with EB Medicine was addressed to Brian, but I'll throw it to all of you. Multiple of you, and I've heard other people talking about how they've increased programming during this time, and started doing weekly Zoom calls for people. Are you also increasing paid webinars? Are you doing paid webinars, or is this primarily a community building programming effort, or is it also a direct revenue opportunity as well? And I'll start with Brian since it was question addressed to you.
Yep. So for the most part, we're doing, I would say, if anything new, those community ones are free. They're not sponsored. We're trying to keep it on the peer-to-peer piece. We have not added paid webinars at this point. So the only webinars or anything like that we're running are free to attend regardless, and then it may have a sponsor. So we're not right now getting money from the delegates and what we consider the attendees or that core practitioner audience in most of the markets. It's about sponsor money, or it's just on the engagement side.
Yep, and it's just keeping them in the community while they can't come together in person. Anybody else have any basically similar experience or anything different? Yeah, Heather, I saw you first, and then David. Oh, Heather, you're muted. Right? It happens. We all know it.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, we're getting horrible feedback. we have added both paid and sponsored. So we've moved some of our sponsored over, so those are free to attend. But we have added paid around what we're calling the heart attack topics. And it's really very much focused on, you know, getting through this time in a way that's relevant. We're multi-market. So, you know, in PR news, there's a lot of crisis management going on. For experiential marketing, these are corporate event marketers. And so we've done really well with our paid webinars, and we're getting between 20 and 30 grand a clip.
Nice. That's great. I've got to say, you know, I know when this first happened back in March and April, and this was primarily in B2B media, not so much in the SIPA world, but there was a big rush to open up content and make it free to contribute to the community, which is really a delightful thing. But creating peer-to-peer forums, I think, is a great thing to do. It's also a great money-making opportunity. People had a greatly increased demand for content, and to just sort of blindly give everything away, I just thought was, you know, didn't we learn this mistake like, you know, 15, 18 years ago, the first time? So anyway, I'm glad to hear that experience. And David, I know you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to say to Anna that I think it would definitely be relevant to you in a continuing medical education or professional education environment. And I mentioned it to everyone else on this call, so just a short repeat, but we did discount additional seats on our training site licenses. And again, in our case, we were trying to replace about just under $500,000 in revenue that had disappeared. And it ended up being a good lead gen source. So it was paid, but it was at a discount. And we brought in now about $65,000 in add-on seats to existing training site licenses. So that's kind of a discounted paid model that's helped fill the gap, you know, 15% of the gap we have. So there might be something there on the paid side, but cheap paid, in response to a very good question from Anna.
Question for Mark Seabarth. Interested in your thoughts on, thank you, David, by the way, excuse me. Interested in your thoughts on how best to provide exhibitor sponsors with value they've come to expect, i.e. audience, market research, business development, from F2F events, which isn't a term I'm familiar with. Am I just out of things? Is that
Face-to-face.
Face-to-face, there we go. All right, thanks. Anybody want to add something to that? How, you know, what are there particular things you're doing in, you know, to keep those sponsors and exhibitors, you know, what are the kinds of extra steps you're throwing in to keep them not wanting to take their revenue back? Heather.
So I'll start. I mean, I think the one thing that is important is whatever platform you're on, understanding the back end metrics, because really, if you can deliver those leads to a sponsor or an exhibitor, however it is you're set up, the more leads that they can generate. I mean, we did an awards program with 3 sponsors, and the sponsors said they got more direct leads from people coming in, engaging with them, because our lead capture on the platform was good. So I think you do have to understand what the back end is that you can give to those folks. The other thing is we have really tried to uncouple our thought that, you know, in a live event, you go and there's this wandering around experience, right? You get a cocktail or a coffee and you have a break and you've got time to fill in, so you're wandering around. And in a virtual event or an online experience, that's gone. And so we've added a lot of, you know, this kind of networking only. I think Brian was calling them demo days, right? Where you're delivering the content separately from where you're delivering the vendor experience. And so we're doing them for in one of our markets, LeadsCon, and we're calling them power hours. And same kind of a, example where people are doing demos, things are scheduled, we're inviting the community, and we're doing one a month. So that, we're continuing to drive. And after the first one, we're like, you guys missed it last month because we sold out. So we're really trying to create those experiences and some urgency around that. The other thing for people, there are some people that aren't looking for leads. They just want to be associated and affiliated with with thought leadership, be in the market. And we are going forward with having our lunches sponsored. So you can work with Grubhub or Uber Eats, and a sponsor can actually sponsor the lunch and somebody gets a code. And so if you have somebody who is sponsoring a lunch or a reception, then they're told, here's your code and you can order your lunch and have it delivered. And this has been brought to you by the sponsor. And then, you can also send the sponsor's message out there. But I think you have to get creative. I mean, I think everybody's pressed to get more creative in this time with trying to do things a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
And just to add on to that, I think everything I agree with there. What you find is the event lead from your sponsor or exhibitor could be in field marketing or whatever it may be. And then if it turns into a digital product, it can change hands and go to a demand gen lead or someone else within the organization. And so you have to ensure what that person who maybe has gone to your event and knows your event and has a track history of a number of years, that could be getting passed over to someone now who has a very different way of looking at success. And so to Heather's point about the metrics, it's essential, but also peeling the onion back, knowing your customer and how deep, what are they charging? What kind of solution do they have? Because if I can get them the 10 right people to look and to meet with them in some sort of online forum, that could do the job. Does it get them into the pipeline? So it really does take a deeper understanding of who you might be getting passed over to. Are you still dealing with the same people? Don't take your relationship and your history of a successful in-person event for granted as you think about it, because it's a different game. The leads are not the same. It's not apples to apples. It depends as targeted as you can be, the better it is, because at the end of the day, these folks all need pipeline. They need things moving and they need to convert. And that's how we can help, as long as we're delivering and understand what needs to go in that pipe to help move it along for them. So just be conscious of your buyer there.
I think that's an excellent point, Brian. And this is the kind of thing that these are the kinds of enforced disciplines that we should have been doing all along. But when you have a pattern that works really well for years and years and years without challenge, it's easy to kind of just take that for granted. And now we're not being able to take things for granted. And so this is the kind of thing that I think can pay dividends for us for the next decade, is because we're being reminded about you got to work for that. You got to figure out what they're looking for and deliver that. Right? So anyway.
Yeah, as I was right after I fell asleep last night, I had a dream that someone was throwing knives at me. I'm not usually prone to that kind of violence in my dream life, and I thought, perhaps this is getting to me. I maybe taking this to heart a little too much. So it's important stuff. It's not easy, man.
No, it's not. If we're easy, everyone could do it. Question from Lynn. She loves the idea of having online leadership meetings. She's wondering about using them not just to engage the community, but also as a way to bring more people into the community. So using it, for engagement and for audience development. People having success with using these things to bring in new people at this time?
I'll start. I mean, we're seeing in some of the markets, we are seeing new names come in, but we're trying to be very deliberate and very conscious of who we get onto those webinars, who we partner with, very aggressively looking at what their following is, because you can go to your same database and what's the new really going to be? So what are you doing differently, and how you look at who you partner with for the content? You need to start thinking about those things. So we have seen more success when we partner with someone with a following to deliver the content, and that is helping to drive more new than if we're just hitting our same lists with content we normally do.
Yep. Nice. Anybody else have anything you want to add?
You know,
I'll just add, sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
sorry, I would say that there's at least one competitor in our market who has done things like demo days, like Brian mentioned, and he's added like a community slam, you know, kind of come and let's work through the industry's problems together on Thursdays, you know. And I think it's, you know, it sounds good. I think the devil's in the details on those things, and the experience that you have when you participate is really important. And we just work, you know, for a while I've made myself crazy about, like, oh, they're doing that, we got to do this, we got to stay on top of that. We've typically been the leaders in the industry on innovating and delivering things. And when we do something, we try to think it all the way through and make sure the experience is good. So, like, if you're coming to solve the industry's problems on Thursdays at 11, and it's just like whoever shows up that Thursday, hey, what's on your mind? You know, what really can be accomplished? And on the demo days, you know, I don't know how Brian is doing it. In our market, what's happening is that they're doing, I think, 30-minute demos, 20 or 30 minutes or something like that. So it's really not a demo. It's a sales pitch that has a demo in part of it. And they're long, you know, and sort of rambling. And so when we incorporated demos into our strategy and tech conference, we did this well before the pandemic. It was going to be in the live conference. We had a demo stage. We've made these demos maximum 8 minutes. You can only show product. There's no PowerPoints. You know, we took steps to make it a good experience for the audience. And of course, if it's a good experience for the audience, then a sponsor, if there is one, you know, is going to like that. And so anyway, that's
Right.
just sort of a long answer to say, I think it's really, sure, a leadership meeting could be used to generate new audience, but I think what's important is the quality of the experience that you have.
Yep, good point, Stephanie. Question from Barb. This was addressed to Brian, but everybody. She was wondering about your $9.95 online event pricing. How did that compare to the in-person pricing? And you know, how do early bird discounts come into play in the online event world?
Right. So that is Administrative Professionals Conference. $9.95 is about half the average rate of what that event is. It's higher than what the industry average rate is. SEER just did some research that came out more in the $500 range per attendee if you are charging. And for us, we started at $8.95 and it'll go up to $10.95. And we are getting very aggressive on bulk discounts. So we have seen groups of 50 come in and register, and obviously we're working with them, particularly if they were already registered. That gives us the ability to sort of be more flexible as we go. But we knew going in we were charging a higher price point to do it. We feel we're delivering a high level of value, and we don't want to undermine that. You know, we think there is a certain value in that level of content. We're providing the same amount of content and a variety of other content elements that we weren't providing. And we've seen success. I mean, it will not be as many people as we get to the in-person show. It will not be at the same price point. It's that digital dimes on the dollar comment that's been made and been repeated a lot, and it's true. but we do feel it's the right price for this event, where it is truly a much deeper training experience for them.
Yeah. Anybody else have any different approaches, philosophies, experiences in pricing the online event versus the in-person? Stephanie, the event you've got next week, what's the pricing plan there versus what you had been planning?
Yeah, so the in-person event was priced at about, I think it was 1049 or per person for the early bird, and maybe 1449 was our full price for that. And for the virtual event, we had an early bird of, I think, $399 and a full price of $599, and then we've done these team tickets, as I mentioned before, that range from, I think, $699 to $699 early bird, $999 regular for a small team up to, I think, 4 people, and then $1249 for a big team, which is up to, I think, 10 people. And what we found is just the pricing, the early bird, the promotion, the sign up looks a lot more like a webinar than it did than a regular conference. Although that's also because of the timing of when all this happened. You know, in March when things shut down, nobody was signing up for conferences. No way, no how, for no reason. You know, they just wanted to get a handle on what was going on. So for that reason, of course, the current conference timeframe has been compressed. But you know, since people don't have to schedule travel, I think that whole thing is more compressed than it would be.
Yeah. Well, we have one event a year, and it's mid-August, and it's always in person. It's a small event. We've brought that price down substantially for the online version. It is shorter, and they're not getting the face time with the analyst, which is a big piece of why people come. So we felt like, well, we're not really delivering the full value. And if we choose a significantly different price point without the travel costs and all, we might be able to reach a different layer of our customers and attract more people. And so far, that isn't really panning out. But to the point of the early bird, our early bird for a mid-August event usually ends, I think, at the end of April. It now ends at the end of July. So the last 3 weeks, and usually in the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, we don't get any new responses, and we're getting them. Obviously, you know, I'm expecting we'll keep getting them essentially right up to the event. So that's one nice thing. It changes the period that you can be marketing really right up to the event. I don't know if anybody had anything else there. I've got another question. First of all, Anna said thank you. And David, I think this is going back to you because you had addressed Anna's concern specifically. Do you have any tips for keeping the production costs low? And you know, one thing, and we're just about out of time, but we didn't really talk about the hybrid events, which I know a lot of people talk about those coming in the future. That wonderful thing about the hybrid event sounds like we get to start paying Steve Wynn again, and we get to incur the double production cost of doing all of the online stuff and all of the in-person. So we have that to look forward to. But I'm afraid that might have to wait until next episode. So I see we are right up at the hour. I wanted to, first of all, thank everybody for attending. Thank the panelists here, Brian, David, Heather, and Stephanie. Thank you so much. This is the time slot that works for the people in this Slack workspace, because it works in England, it works in LA, and everywhere in between. So I think, you know, for when we do these, just to reiterate, this is when they're going to be, and we're going to try to do these every couple of weeks on different topics. I also want to remind people that in the Slack workspace there is an events channel. So, you know, please let's move over there and we can continue this conversation. And I think, you know, we're in a very dynamic period in our very dynamic industry. Probably no portion of it is any more dynamic than the events space. So I suspect we're going to be doing more of these, online meetups around events in the coming weeks and months. So we'll be back. But think this was a great start. So thank you, everybody.